The signal came through at 0400 hours, cutting through the silence of deep space like a knife. Commander Brandon Hayes was reviewing supply reports when the communication officer burst onto the bridge of the horizon's edge. The young officer's face was pale, her hands shaking as she handed him the datapad. Brandon read the message 3 times before he believed it. The Valorians were under attack. Their peaceful colony world was burning. They were calling for help from anyone who would listen. He remembered the Valorians. Everyone in the human fleet remembered them. 50 years ago, when the Red Plague had swept through Earth's colonies, killing billions, the Valorians had been the only species to help. They had shared their medical technology freely, asking nothing in return. They had saved humanity when no one else would even answer the calls. Brandon stood up and walked to the main view screen. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass. He was 42 years old, with gray starting to show in his hair. He had seen combat before. He knew what war looked like. But this was different. "Get me Admiral Drake," he said. "Now." The Galactic Council chamber was full of noise and argument. Representatives from 100 different species talked over each other, their translators creating a chaos of sound. The Valorian ambassador stood in the center, her crystalline body flickering with desperate light as she pleaded for help. "Please," she said, "my people are dying. The Krell are taking our children. They are destroying everything. We need help now." A Thoraxian delegate, a massive creature covered in thick armor plating, clicked his mandibles. "The Council must follow proper procedures. We cannot simply send military forces without authorization forms and impact assessments." "Your procedures will take weeks," the Valorian said. "We do not have weeks. We have hours." Admiral Kevin Drake watched the Council feed from his command center aboard the battleship Iron Will. He was 60 years old, with scars on his face from 3 different wars. He had fought the Krell before, 20 years ago at the Battle of Proxima Station. He knew what they did to conquered populations. He turned to his tactical officer. "How many ships do we have in range?" 27, sir. The 3rd Fleet is on maneuvers in Sector 19. We could be at the Valorian system in 32 hours if we push the engines hard." "What about Council approval?" The tactical officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, the Council hasn't even voted yet. They're still debating procedural issues." Drake stood up and walked to the viewport. Beyond the reinforced glass, he could see the other ships of his fleet hanging in space. Each one was a weapon, designed and built by humanity's best engineers. Each one carried men and women who had sworn to protect the innocent. He thought about the Valorians treating human children during the plague. He thought about the doctors who had worked without sleep for weeks to save human lives. He thought about the debt humanity owed. "Contact all ship commanders," he said. "Full combat mobilization. We leave in 1 hour." "Sir, without Council approval?" This could be considered an act of war. Drake turned and looked at his officer. "The Valorians saved billions of human lives. We're going to save theirs. I don't care what the Council thinks about it." The news spread through the human fleet like fire. On every ship, crews rushed to battle stations. Engineers checked weapon systems. Pilots prepared their fighters. Marines loaded their gear. Within 40 minutes, every human vessel was ready for combat. Captain Amy Foster stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching her crew work. She was 35 years old, the youngest ship captain in the fleet. She had earned her position through skill and determination, not politics or connections. "Navigation! Plot a course to the Valorian system," she said. "Maximum speed." "Captain, that will stress the engines beyond recommended limits." "The engines were built on Earth," Amy said. "They can handle it. Those people saved my sister during the plague. We're going to save them." The Galactic Council was still debating when the first human ships began jumping through quantum space. The other species watched in shock as the human fleet simply left, ignoring all protocols and procedures. A Meridian diplomat, Her aquatic body, contained in a pressure suit, spoke urgently. "They cannot do this. They must wait for approval. What if this creates a diplomatic incident?" An elderly Valorian counselor, one who had been to Earth during the plague years, watched the departing ships. "They are doing what is right. That is more important than your procedures." The Krell Syndicate had been raiding and conquering for 200 years. They moved through space like locusts, taking resources and enslaving populations. The Galactic Council had passed resolutions condemning them. The Council had formed committees to study the problem, but no one had stopped them. Zrathak, the Krell commander, stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his forces strip the Valorian world. His species was powerful, feared across dozens of systems. He had personally led the conquest of 17 worlds. "How much longer until the resource extraction is complete?" he asked. 3 more days, Commander. We have already processed 40% of the population." Zrathak clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. "Good. The Valorians are weak. They make excellent slaves for the mining operations." "Commander, we're receiving a transmission. It's from an unknown fleet." "Put it through." The view screen flickered, and a human face appeared. Zrathak had heard of humans, but had never encountered them directly. They were a new species, barely a century in space. They were supposed to be insignificant. "This is Admiral Kevin Drake of the Human Defense Fleet," the voice said. "You have attacked a species under humanity's protection. You have one opportunity to withdraw. Leave now, or face the consequences." Zrathak laughed, the sound echoing through his bridge. "How many ships do you have, human?" 27. "I have 43 combat vessels, each larger than yours. I have conquered 17 systems. I suggest you turn around and go home before I add your ships to my collection." Drake's face showed no emotion. "You have been warned. What happens next is your choice." The transmission ended. Zrathak turned to his officers. "Prepare all weapons. When the humans arrive, we will teach them what happens to those who interfere with the Krell Syndicate." But Zrathak had never fought a Deathworlder species before. He did not understand what was coming toward him through the darkness of space. He did not know that humans had evolved on a world where gravity was heavier, where predators were faster, where survival meant being tougher than anything else. He did not know that when humans made a promise, they kept it, no matter the cost. The human fleet crossed the distance in 32 hours. Their engines. The Krell fleet hung in orbit like a swarm of metal insects. Their ships were huge, each one 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. Energy shields glowed around their hulls, and plasma cannons tracked the approaching human force. Lieutenant Amy Foster studied her tactical display aboard the Valiant. The numbers were clear. 43 Krell warships against 27 human vessels. Every analysis program she ran showed the same result. The humans should lose this battle. But Amy had learned something during her years in the fleet. Numbers did not tell the whole story. Earth had taught humanity lessons that no other species understood. When you grew up on a world where the gravity tried to crush you, where the weather could kill you, where predators hunted in packs, you learned to fight differently. "All weapons online," her tactical officer reported. "Shields at maximum, engines ready for combat speed." "Good," Amy said. She looked at her crew. They were young, most of them in their 20s. They were nervous, but they were ready. "Remember, we're faster than they are. We're tougher than they are, and we're fighting for something they'll never understand." On the Krell flagship, Zrathak watched the human ships approach. They were moving in a strange formation, spread out across a wide area. It made no sense. Any military commander knew that ships should stay together for mutual support. "They're making this too easy," he said. "All ships, prepare to fire. We'll destroy them before they get close enough to be a threat." His tactical officer hesitated. "Commander, their speed is increasing. They're accelerating beyond normal combat velocities." "Let them come." Our shields will stop anything they throw at us. The human ships crossed into weapons range. The Krell opened fire immediately. Massive plasma beams, each one capable of melting through a mountain, lanced across space. They struck the lead human vessels with enough energy to destroy a city. The human ships shuddered under the impact. Their shields flared bright white. But they did not stop. They did not even slow down. Captain Greg Martinez commanded the destroyer Nightfall. His ship had taken 3 direct hits in the first 30 seconds. His shield display showed red warnings. His hull had damage on 2 decks. Normal military doctrine would be to fall back and regroup. Greg ignored doctrine. All power to forward shields. Weapons, lock onto that Krell cruiser. Give me everything we have. Sir, our shields won't hold if we take another hit like that. They don't need to hold forever. They just need to hold long enough. The Nightfall accelerated directly toward the Krell formation. Behind it, 6 more human destroyers followed. They moved like wolves, each captain knowing exactly where the others would be without needing to communicate. The Krell fired again. More plasma beams struck the human ships. The Nightfall's forward shield collapsed completely. The beam hit the hull directly, burning through armor plating and destroying 3 compartments. But the hull held. Human ships were not built like the ships of other species. They did not rely on shields to protect them. Their hulls were layered with metals from Earth. Alloys that had been tested in the crushing pressure of the deep ocean and the extreme cold of Antarctica. They were designed to take damage and keep fighting. "Return fire," Greg ordered. The Nightfall launched a spread of kinetic penetrators. They were simple weapons, just tungsten rods accelerated to incredible speeds. The galactic species had abandoned such primitive weapons centuries ago in favor of energy weapons. But the Krell were about to learn why primitive could still be deadly. The tungsten rods hit the Krell cruiser at a significant fraction of light speed. The energy shields, calibrated to stop plasma and lasers, barely slowed them down. The rods punched through the hull like it was paper. Internal explosions ripped through 3 decks. The cruiser listed to one side, trailing atmosphere and debris. "Target destroyed," the tactical officer reported. "Find another one," Greg said. The battle spread across the orbital space. Human fighters launched from the carrier Defiance, small craft that moved like angry wasps. Lieutenant Nicole Brady led her squadron through a cloud of debris, her hands steady on the controls. She had grown up in Colorado, in the mountains where the air was thin and the weather was harsh. She had learned to fly in conditions that would ground pilots from other worlds. This was just another day at work. "Red Squadron, follow me. We're going for those harvester ships." The Krell harvester vessels were massive, designed to extract resources from planets and process populations for slavery. They had weapons, but they were slow and clumsy. They relied on fighter escorts for protection. Nicole's squadron tore through the escort fighters like they were not even there. Human pilots did not fly defensively. They flew like predators, always on the attack, always looking for the kill. She locked onto a harvester ship and fired her missiles. They struck the engine section, and the massive vessel began to tumble. Thousands of Krell were on board, but Nicole did not think about that. She thought about the Valorian children who had been taken into those ships. She thought about what the Krell did to their slaves. "One down," she reported. "Moving to the next target." Admiral Drake watched the battle from the command deck of the Iron Will. The tactical display showed the disposition of forces. The humans were taking damage, but they were dealing more than they received. The Krell formation was starting to break apart. "They're trying to surround individual ships," his tactical officer said. "Standard pack hunting tactics." Drake smiled. "They don't understand. We invented pack hunting. Lieutenant Chang, execute Plan Delta." Commander Lisa Chang was the best tactical officer in the human fleet. She had studied every battle in human history, from ancient warfare to modern space combat. She understood something that no computer could calculate. War was not about numbers. It was about will. "All ships, Delta formation," she broadcast. "Converge on coordinates 447 by 892. The human ships, scattered across the battle space, suddenly changed direction. They moved with perfect coordination, each captain anticipating what the others would do. They were not following orders. They were hunting together. The Krell, who had been trying to surround human vessels, suddenly found themselves caught in a trap. Human ships appeared on all sides, firing from multiple angles. The coordination was impossible, yet it was happening. Zrathak watched 3 of his cruisers die in less than a minute. How are they doing this? They should not be able to coordinate so precisely. His second officer checked the communication frequencies. They're barely using radio at all, Commander. I don't understand how they're working together. What the Krell did not understand was that humans had been hunting in packs for millions of years. Every human captain could read the battle like they were reading the minds of their fellow hunters. They knew where to move, when to strike, when to fall back. It was instinct, bred into them over countless generations of survival on a deadly world. A Krell dreadnought, one of their most powerful ships, turned to face the human battleship Revenge. The dreadnought was twice the size, with weapons that could crack a planet. It opened fire with every gun it had. The Revenge took the hit. Shields failed. Armor burned. Internal explosions killed 17 crew members. But the ship kept coming. On the bridge, Captain Ryan Fletcher gripped his command chair. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. Damage report. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Weapon systems at 60%. Port engine offline. What about the main gun? Main gun is operational, sir. Ryan looked at the Krell dreadnought on his view screen. It was preparing to fire again. Target their bridge. Full power. Fire. The Revenge's main weapon was a mass driver, similar to the kinetic penetrators, but much larger. It fired a projectile the size of a small car at speeds that bent physics. The recoil pushed the entire ship backward despite its inertial dampeners. The projectile hit the dreadnought's bridge dead center. The impact was so violent that it created a shock wave visible to the naked eye. The entire front section of the Krell ship simply ceased to exist, transformed into expanding gas and debris. "Target destroyed," the tactical officer said quietly. Ryan sat back in his chair. Around him, his crew worked to contain the Krell fleet tried to break through the human blockade. Their ships scattered in different directions, each captain trying to save his own vessel. It was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. Admiral Drake watched the enemy formation collapse on his tactical display. After 6 hours of brutal combat, the Krell had finally broken. Now came the hunting phase. "All ships, pursue and destroy," he ordered. "No survivors, no mercy." Lieutenant Nicole Brady pulled her fighter into a tight turn, chasing a Krell corvette that was trying to reach the edge of the system. Her fuel was running low, and her weapons had maybe 10 shots left. She did not care. "Red 3, you're taking fire from your 6, her wingman called. Nicole checked her sensors. 2 Krell fighters were on her tail, their weapons charging. She smiled and pushed her throttle to maximum. "I see them. Watch this." She dove straight toward the debris field from a destroyed ship. The metal fragments and radiation would make targeting nearly impossible. The Krell fighters followed, still firing. Their shots went wide, missing her by meters. Nicole waited until she was deep in the debris cloud, then killed her engines and spun her fighter around. The 2 Krell fighters shot past her, suddenly exposed and off balance. She fired twice. Both targets exploded. "That's how we do it in Colorado," she said. On the surface of Valorian Prime, the civilian population watched the battle through their telescopes and sensors. They had been hiding in bunkers for 3 days, listening to the sounds of their world being destroyed above them. Now they saw something different. The Krell ships that had been bombarding their cities were running, and the human vessels were hunting them down with cold efficiency. One elderly Valorian, who had been a doctor during the human plague, stood outside his bunker and watched the sky. "They came," he whispered. "They actually came." Commander Lisa Chang coordinated the pursuit from her station aboard the Revenge. The ship had taken heavy damage, but its systems were still functional. She tracked every Krell vessel, plotting intercept courses and assigning targets to human ships. "The enemy is splitting into 3 groups," she reported. "Group Alpha is heading for the asteroid belt. Group Beta is trying to reach the gas giant. Group Gamma is attempting a direct jump to quantum space." "Countermeasures?" Admiral Drake asked. "Already in motion, sir. The Nightfall and 5 destroyers are intercepting Group Alpha. The Valiant with cruiser support is moving on Group Beta. We're sending our fastest ships after Group Gamma before they can jump." Drake nodded. This was what human tactical training was built for. Not just winning battles, but destroying the enemy so completely that they could never threaten anyone again. The Krell Group Alpha reached the asteroid belt and tried to hide among the rocks. The asteroids were large, some the size of small moons. The Krell ships powered down their engines and went silent, hoping the humans would pass them by. Captain Greg Martinez brought the Nightfall into the belt slowly. His sensors swept across the asteroids, looking for any sign of the enemy. On Earth, his ancestors had been hunters who tracked prey through forests. That instinct was still there, bred into his bones. "Contact," his sensor officer said. 3 signatures hiding behind the large asteroid at coordinates 778 by 334. "How can you tell they're Krell and not just rocks?" "Their mass is wrong, sir. And there are trace heat signatures. They think they're hidden, but their ships are still radiating energy from the battle." Greg smiled. "Show them why you can't hide from a predator. All ships converge on that location. Fire on my mark." The 6 human destroyers moved into position silently. The Krell never knew they had been found until the first missiles struck. By then, it was too late. Group Beta made it to the gas giant and tried to use the planet's massive size to shield themselves. The Valiant and 4 cruisers followed them into the planet's gravity well. Captain Amy Foster watched the Krell ships on her display. They were using the gas giant's magnetic field to interfere with sensors. It was a smart tactic. Against most species, it would have worked. But humans had explored gas giants in their own solar system long before they reached the stars. They had sent probes deep into Jupiter and Saturn, learning how to navigate the crushing pressure and radiation. This was not new to them. "Navigation! Plot a course through the upper atmosphere. Use the planet's gravity to slingshot us around to their position. Captain, that maneuver will stress the hull beyond safety limits." Amy looked at her navigator. The young man was barely 25. She remembered being that young once before combat had aged her. "The hull will hold. Trust the engineers who built this ship. They knew what we'd need." The Valiant dove into the gas giant's atmosphere. The hull began to shake as they hit the outer layers of gas. Temperature warnings lit up across every console. The ship groaned and creaked, metal flexing under forces that would crush vessels from other worlds. But it held. They shot out on the other side directly behind the Krell ships. The enemy had been focused on watching their backs, not expecting anyone to come through the planet itself. "Fire all weapons," Amy ordered. The Krell ships died in seconds, caught completely by surprise. Their shields were down, their weapons unprepared. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Group Gamma thought they would escape. They were the fastest Krell ships, built for speed rather than combat. Their quantum drives were charging, ready to jump them out of the system and into the safety of deep space. But Lieutenant Jake Morrison, piloting the destroyer Swift, had other plans. His ship had been damaged early in the battle. His port engine was offline, and his shields were down to 30%. By all logic, he should have fallen back for repairs. Instead, he pushed his remaining engine to maximum and intercepted the Krell ships just as they were about to jump. "If I can't have both engines, neither can you," he said, and fired every missile he had. The missiles struck the lead Krell ship's engine section. The quantum drive, already charged and ready to jump, exploded. The blast was so powerful it destroyed 2 other Krell ships nearby and damaged 3 more. The surviving Krell vessels tumbled through space, their drives dead, their hopes of escape gone. Human ships arrived minutes later to finish them off. Back at the main battle, Zrathak watched his fleet die piece by piece. He had started with 43 ships. Now he had 31. The humans had not lost a single vessel, though many were damaged. "This is impossible," he said. "They're outnumbered. They should be losing." His tactical officer looked at him with fear in his compound eyes. "Commander, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They don't care about their own losses. They don't retreat when damaged. They just keep attacking." Zrathak realized the truth too late. The humans were not fighting a military campaign. They were hunting. Every move they made, every tactic they used, was designed to trap and kill their prey, and the Krell had become prey. A human frigate, the Relentless, limped through the debris field. The ship had taken a direct hit to its bridge earlier, killing the captain and half the command crew. By military regulations, it should have withdrawn from the battle. But the second officer, Lieutenant Megan Price, had taken command. She had a concussion and her vision was blurred, but she could still read the tactical display. "Engineering, how much power do we have?" "Maybe 30%, Lieutenant. We're running on backup systems." "Weapons?" "Port railgun is still operational." Megan saw a Krell destroyer trying to sneak away through the debris. It was damaged, moving slowly, but it still had weapons. If it escaped, it might kill humans later. "Target that destroyer. 1 shot. Make it count." The railgun fired. The magnetic accelerator hurled a solid slug at hypersonic speed. It hit the Krell destroyer's reactor section perfectly. The ship exploded, adding to the field of debris. "Target destroyed," the weapons officer reported. Megan allowed herself to close her eyes for just a moment. Her head was pounding, and she could taste blood. But there was no time to rest. There were still enemy ships out there, still threats to eliminate. This was what it meant to be human. Pain was temporary. The mission was forever. Admiral Drake received reports from all sectors. Group Alpha eliminated. Group Beta destroyed. Group Gamma neutralized. The Krell fleet was down to 28 functional ships, and they were scattered across the system. "Sir, the Krell commander is broadcasting a surrender offer," his communication officer said. Drake read the message. Zrathak was offering tribute, prisoners, information about Krell military bases. He was promising to leave Valorian space forever. He was begging for mercy. Drake thought about the Valorian civilians who had been processed in the first days of the invasion. He thought about the 17 other worlds the Krell had conquered. He thought about the slaves working in Krell mines across a dozen systems. "Denied," he said. "Send a response on all frequencies." His face appeared on every screen in the system, visible to the Krell, the Valorians below, and the Galactic Council representatives who were watching from afar. The final battle began at hour 9. Zrathak's remaining ships formed a tight defensive formation at the edge of the system. Their weapons pointed outward in all directions. 28 Krell vessels against the entire human fleet. The odds had reversed completely. Captain Eric Davidson brought the Warhammer into weapons range slowly. His ship was one of the largest in the human fleet, built for this exact purpose. While other vessels were damaged from hours of combat, the Warhammer was fresh and ready. "Target the flagship," Eric said. "I want that ship gone." Zrathak saw the human battleship approaching. Its hull was dark gray, scarred from previous battles, covered with weapons. It looked like something that had crawled out of a nightmare. All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel. Destroy it before it gets closer." 28 Krell ships opened fire at once. Energy beams, plasma cannons, and missile swarms converged on the Warhammer. The space around the battleship turned white with the intensity of the bombardment. The Warhammer's shields held for exactly 4 seconds before failing. The remaining energy struck the hull directly. Armor plating melted. Compartments decompressed. 17 crew members died instantly. Eric held onto his command chair as the ship shook. "Damage report. Hull breaches on decks 2, 5, and 9. Forward armor at 60%. But weapons are still online. Then we keep going. Return fire." The Warhammer had a main gun that ran almost the entire length of the ship. It was a mass driver, designed to fire projectiles at speeds that physics said were impossible. The energy requirements were massive. Firing it once used enough power to run a small city for a year. Eric targeted Zrathak's flagship. "Main gun, full power, fire!" The projectile left the Warhammer at a velocity that created a visible distortion in space. It crossed the distance in less than a second. The Krell flagship's shields tried to stop it and failed. The armor tried to absorb the impact and failed. The projectile punched through the entire length of the ship, entering through the bow and exiting through the engines. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flagship simply came apart, internal explosions tearing through every deck. Zrathak died without even knowing what hit him. "Flagship destroyed," the tactical officer reported. Around the battlefield, every human ship accelerated. With the Krell commander dead, the enemy formation began to collapse. Ships that had been holding position started to scatter. The discipline broke. The fear took over, and the humans showed no mercy. Commander Brandon Hayes watched a Krell cruiser trying to flee toward the outer system. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, had taken damage earlier, but it was still combat-capable. "Helm, intercept course. Maximum speed." "Sir, that ship isn't shooting at us anymore. It's running." Brandon looked at his helmsman. The young officer was barely 22. He had probably never seen real combat before today. "That ship participated in the bombardment of Valorian cities. It killed civilians. We're not letting it escape to do the same thing somewhere else." The Horizon's Edge caught the cruiser near the system's edge. The Krell ship tried to fight back, but its weapons were depleted, its shields weak. Brandon's ship tore into it with railgun fire, not stopping until the cruiser was nothing but debris. On the planet below, the Valorians emerged from their bunkers. The bombardment had stopped. The Krell ships that had been hovering over their cities were gone, either destroyed or fleeing. They looked up at the sky and saw human ships patrolling the space above them. The vessels moved in patterns, ensuring that no Krell could slip through. The Valorians had been terrified of the Krell. Now they were terrified of what the humans had done to them. Lieutenant Amy Foster brought the Valiant down through the atmosphere. Her ship was not designed for planetary landing, but her orders were clear. "Find any remaining Krell ground forces and eliminate them." The Krell had landed troops in several cities. They had been processing centers, places where civilians were sorted and prepared for slavery. The ground forces were heavily armed, with armor and weapons that made them nearly invincible against the lightly defended Valorians. They were not prepared for human Marines. The Valiant hovered over one of the processing centers and deployed drop pods. 200 Marines fell through the sky in armored capsules, hitting the ground at speeds that would kill unprotected humans. But the Marines were not unprotected. They were wearing powered armor, built with technology that made each soldier into a walking tank. Sergeant Carl Murphy was the first one out of his pod. He had grown up in Detroit, learned to fight in street gangs before joining the military. He had been through 3 wars and had the scars to prove it. "Red team, secure the perimeter. Blue team, evacuate the civilians. Gold team, with me. We're going hunting." The Krell soldiers were twice the size of humans, covered in natural armor plating. They carried weapons that could punch through reinforced concrete. They had conquered a dozen species. But they had never fought humans before. Carl led his team through the processing center. They moved fast, communicating with hand signals, each Marine knowing exactly where the others were. When they found the first group of Krell, the fight was over in seconds. Human weapons were not elegant. They did not use advanced energy systems or plasma technology. They used bullets. High-velocity rounds that punched through armor with simple kinetic force. The Krell had developed their armor to stop energy weapons. It did nothing against lead moving at supersonic speeds. "Area secure," Carl reported. "We've got about 200 Valorian civilians here. Most are injured, but alive." "Can you hold that position?" Amy asked from the Valiant. "Ma'am, we're not holding anything. We're moving forward. There are 3 more processing centers in this city, and we're taking them all." In orbit, the hunt continued. Human ships chased down every Krell vessel they could find. Some Krell tried to hide in gas clouds. Some tried to power down and drift, hoping to be mistaken for debris. Some tried to fight. None of them escaped. Captain Ryan Fletcher commanded the Relentless. His ship had been damaged badly in the initial engagement. His hull had breaches on 3 decks. His engines were running at 70% power. His medical bay was full of wounded crew. He should have pulled back for repairs. Instead, he was chasing a Krell destroyer through an asteroid field. "Stay with them. Don't let them get away." "Sir, we're barely holding together. One more hit and we could lose life support." Ryan looked at his executive officer. "Then we better not get hit. Weapons, target their engines. I want them dead in space." The Relentless fired its last missiles. They struck the Krell destroyer's engine section, and the enemy ship went dark, tumbling through space without power. "Should we finish them off, sir?" Ryan thought about it for a moment. The Krell crew was no longer a threat. They were drifting, helpless, probably running out of air. It would be more merciful to destroy them quickly. But mercy was not something humanity was offering today. Leave them. Let them drift. Maybe someone will find them before their oxygen runs out. Maybe not. Admiral Drake received the final casualty reports. 28 Krell ships destroyed in the last hour. 0 escapes. The entire Krell fleet at Valorian Prime had been eliminated. Total human losses: 417 dead, 1,200 wounded, 3 ships damaged beyond immediate repair. Against any other species, those casualties would be considered catastrophic. For humanity, it was an acceptable price. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council," his communication officer said. "Multiple species are demanding we cease military operations immediately." "Tell them the operations will cease when there are no more Krell in this system," Drake said. "Not before." Lieutenant Nicole Brady was on her 5th combat sortie. Her fighter was running on fumes, and her ammunition was almost gone. She had been flying for 11 hours straight. Her body ached. Her eyes were blurry from staring at screens. But there was still one more target. A Krell transport ship was trying to sneak away through the debris field. It was not a military vessel. It was probably full of Krell civilians and non-combatants. Under the rules of war, it should be protected. But the rules of war had been written by species that did not understand total war. Nicole thought about the Valorian children who had been taken. She thought about the families torn apart. She thought about the debt humanity owed. She lined up her shot and fired her last missile. The transport exploded, adding one more piece of debris to the field. "All targets eliminated," she reported. "Returning to base." As her fighter limped back to the carrier, Nicole looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was probably debating what to do about humanity. They were probably discussing resolutions and sanctions. She did not care. Let them debate. Let them discuss. Humanity had sent a message today that would echo across the galaxy. When you threatened humanity's friends, You did not get negotiations. You did not get mercy. You got extinction. The last Krell ship in the system was a small courier vessel. It had been hiding powered down near a moon, hoping to wait out the battle and escape later. But human sensors had found it. Captain Greg Martinez brought the Nightfall alongside the courier. "Open a channel." The Krell pilot appeared on screen. He was young, barely an adult. "Please," he said. "I'm not a soldier. I'm just a messenger. Let me go." 3 days after the battle ended, the Valorian sky was finally clear. No more Krell ships hung in orbit. No more bombardments threatened the cities below. The only vessels visible were human warships, patrolling steadily, making sure no enemy returned. Commander Kate Sullivan stepped off the transport shuttle and onto Valorian soil. She was 38 years old with red hair starting to show gray at the temples. She had been a combat medic before becoming a logistics officer. Now she was in charge of relief operations for an entire planet. The Valorian greeting party stood waiting. Their crystalline bodies flickered with colors that Kate's translator said meant gratitude and fear. They were grateful for the rescue. They were afraid of the rescuers. "We are honored by your presence," the lead Valorian said. His name was difficult for humans to pronounce, so Kate's translator just called him Elder 47. "We wish to thank humanity for coming to our aid." Kate looked at the destroyed city behind him. Buildings had been leveled. The processing center was still smoking from where the Marines had assaulted it. Bodies were being recovered from the rubble. "We owe you a debt. You saved us during the plague. We don't forget our friends. The price you paid was heavy. So many of your people died." 417, Kate said. "Every one of them a volunteer. Every one of them knowing the risks. They died protecting innocents. That's what humans do." She turned to her team. "Set up the medical stations in the central plaza. Engineering crews, start working on power restoration. Food distribution begins in 2 hours. Let's move." The human relief workers spread through the city. They were not soldiers, just regular people who had trained for disaster response. They carried medical supplies, food, tools for rebuilding. They worked alongside the Valorians, communicating through translators, helping to pull survivors from collapsed buildings. One young human, an engineer named Pete Collins, worked to restore power to a hospital. A Valorian doctor watched him work, amazed at how quickly the human solved problems that would have taken Valorian engineers days. "How do you work so fast?" the doctor asked. Pete looked up from his repair. He was covered in dirt and sweat. "We have to. People are dying. Speed matters more than perfection right now." In orbit, Admiral Drake stood on the bridge of the Iron Will and watched the planet below. His fleet was battered but intact. 3 ships would need months of repair work. Every vessel had casualties, but they had won. "Sir, the Galactic Council is requesting your presence at an emergency session," his communication officer said. Drake had been expecting this. "Put them through." The view screen showed the council chamber. Hundreds of species representatives filled the seats. Some looked angry, some looked scared. All of them were staring at him. A Thoraxian counselor spoke first. "Admiral Drake, the council demands an explanation for your actions. You attacked without authorization. You refused to accept surrender. You eliminated an entire fleet. This is not how civilized species conduct warfare." Drake looked at the camera. He was tired. His uniform was stained with coffee and had blood on one sleeve from helping with wounded crew. He had not slept in 3 days. He did not care about diplomatic language anymore. "For 200 years, you've debated while the Krell killed and enslaved," he said. "You formed committees while they conquered worlds. You passed resolutions while they committed genocide. Humanity is done waiting for you to grow a spine." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Drake talked over them. We will protect our allies with every weapon we have. We will hunt our enemies until they are extinct. And we will not apologize for being effective at it. A Meridian diplomat tried to speak. But the cost in lives, the violence, surely there could have been another way. There was another way, Drake said. You could have stopped the Krell 2 centuries ago when they first started conquering. You chose not to. So when our friends called for help, we came. We did what you should have done long ago. He paused, letting his words sink in. We're not asking for your approval. We're informing you of reality. There is now a species in the galaxy that keeps its promises. If you're our friend, we'll die to protect you. If you're our enemy, we'll hunt you to extinction. Choose your side carefully. The transmission ended. In the council chamber, silence fell. Every representative understood what they had just heard. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. Humanity had proven that they were not like the other species. They were something new, something dangerous. On the human ship Valiant, Captain Amy Foster walked through the medical bay. Wounded crew members lay in beds, some with bandages, some with limbs in casts. She stopped at each bed, talking to her people, thanking them for their service. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was there, his arm in a sling, a bandage around his head. We did good, didn't we, Captain? Amy looked at the young pilot. He was 24 years old. This had been his first real battle. We saved an entire species from slavery. Yeah, we did good. The other species seem scared of us now. They should be. We just showed them what happens when you threaten our friends. Fear is a tool. As long as they're more afraid of being our enemy than our ally, we're doing it right. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Carl Murphy helped Valorian workers clear debris from a school. The building had taken a direct hit during the bombardment. 23 Valorian children had died inside. A Valorian mother approached him. Her crystalline body was cracked in places, showing where she had been injured. You saved my daughter. She was in the processing center when your soldiers came. Carl looked at her. He had seen terrible things in that processing center, things he would have nightmares about for years. Just doing our job, ma'am. Why did you come? Your people had no obligation to help us. You helped us during the plague. My little sister was dying, and Valorian medicine saved her life. When I heard you needed help, I volunteered. That's what humans do for friends. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. Every species heard about what humanity had done. The peaceful species were horrified by the violence. The warrior species were impressed by the efficiency. The predatory species became very quiet and very careful. Within a week, 17 species submitted applications to join humanity's mutual defense network. They were not asking for trade agreements or cultural exchanges. They wanted protection. They wanted to be humanity's friends rather than enemies. The Krell Syndicate's remaining territories began to collapse. Species that had been enslaved for decades rose up in rebellion. They knew that if they fought for their freedom, humanity would support them. The Krell Empire, which had dominated space for 2 centuries, began to crumble. Other predatory empires watched and learned. The Vex Dominion canceled their planned invasion of the L'Oreal system. The Hakor Collective offered peace treaties to 3 species they had been threatening. The message was clear. There was now a species in the galaxy that hunted predators, and no one wanted to be next on the list. Brandon Hayes sat in his quarters aboard the Horizon's Edge, writing letters to the families of crew members who had died. It was the hardest part of command. Each letter had to be personal, had to honor the sacrifice, had to mean something. He finished the last one and leaned back in his chair. Outside his window, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, other species were debating humanity's actions. They were calling humans violent, aggressive, dangerous. Brandon did not care. He thought about the Valorian children who were alive because humans had come. He thought about the 17 species who were now free because the Krell were gone. He thought about the debt humanity owed and the debt they had repaid. His communicator chimed. It was a message from the Valorian government. They had erected a memorial at the site of the first human landing. The inscription was simple but powerful. They came when no one else would. They fought when all others hesitated. They saved us when we had abandoned hope. This is the mark of true friendship. Brandon saved the message. He would share it with his crew. They deserved to know that their sacrifice had meaning. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions for 2 weeks, trying to figure out what to do about humanity. Some species wanted sanctions. Some wanted to embrace the humans as allies. Some just wanted to stay out of their way. In the end, they did nothing, because they understood that humanity did not need their approval. Humanity had the one thing that mattered in the galaxy. They had power, and they had the will to use it. Admiral Drake sat in his ready room and read the intelligence reports. The Krell were finished as a major power. 3 other predatory species had opened diplomatic channels with Earth. 12 more species wanted to join the Mutual Defense Network. His executive officer entered. "Sir, we are receiving word that the Hakor Collective has attacked a human colony at Proxima 7. Drake looked up. "How many ships?" "Early reports suggest 40 vessels." Drake stood up and walked to his viewport. He looked out at his fleet, still damaged from the Valorian battle. Most ships were operating at reduced capacity. They needed repairs, rest, time to recover. "Order all ships to battle stations," he said. "Set course for Proxima 7, maximum speed." "Sir, we're not combat ready. We need at least another week of repairs." Drake turned and looked at his officer. "The Hakor just attacked a human colony. Our people are dying. We leave in 1 hour. Repairs can be done on the way." The officer saluted and left. Drake looked back at the stars. The galaxy was learning about humanity. They were learning that humans kept their promises. They were learning that humans protected their own. They were learning that when you attacked humanity, you did not get negotiations or mercy. You got total war. The word spread through the fleet. Another battle was coming. The crew, still recovering from Valorian Prime, began preparations. They did not complain. They did not question. This was what they had signed up for. On every ship, engineers worked to fix damaged systems. Medical staff prepared for casualties. Pilots checked their fighters. Marines loaded their weapons. The fleet had been hurt, but it was not broken. And when humans were threatened, they did not wait for permission to respond. The human fleet jumped to quantum space, leaving the Valorian system behind. The Valorians watched them go, their saviors departing as quickly as they had arrived. They did not know if they would ever see humans again. But they knew one thing with certainty. When the darkness came, when the predators emerged, when all hope seemed lost, humanity would answer the call. Because that was what Deathworlders did. They survived. They fought. They protected those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy had spent centuries creating rules for civilized warfare, rules about surrender, about civilians, about proportional response. Humanity had listened to those rules, understood them, and then ignored them when their friends were threatened. Because humans came from Earth, a world that had no mercy for the weak, a world where survival meant being tougher, faster, more determined than anything else. A world that had created a species that never gave up, never backed down, and never forgave those who harmed the innocent. Other species would learn to love humanity or fear them. But either way, they would respect them. Because in the cold darkness of space, among the countless worlds and infinite possibilities, one truth had emerged clear and undeniable. Earth had created the deadliest species in the galaxy, and humanity was just getting started. In 1,000 years, historians would look back at the Battle of Valorian Prime as the moment everything changed. The moment when the galaxy learned that humans were not just another species. They were predators, they were protectors, they were survivors from the deadliest world known to exist. And when they made a promise, they kept it. No matter the cost, no matter the enemy, no matter what stood in their way. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of humanity had begun, and nothing in the galaxy could hide from a species that had learned to hunt on Earth. Greg looked at the young Krell. He thought about mercy. He thought about rules. He thought about all the innocent people the Krell had killed over 2 centuries. You should have thought about that before your people attacked our friends. You should have thought about it before you joined an empire built on slavery and conquest. He closed the channel. Destroy it. The Nightfall fired once. The courier exploded. And with that, the Krell presence at Valorian Prime ended completely. Not a single ship remained. Not a single soldier survived. The Krell had come to conquer. Instead, they had learned what happened when you made an enemy of Earth's children. The battle was over. The hunt was complete. And humanity had shown the galaxy exactly what a Deathworlder species was capable of when they stopped holding back. The Krell Syndicate has operated beyond civilized law for 200 years. You have rejected every treaty. You have ignored every warning. You have committed acts that demand justice. Humanity recognizes no surrender from an enemy who has never shown mercy. This ends now. The Galactic Council observers were horrified. The peaceful species could not believe what they were hearing. Even the warrior races were shocked by the cold finality in Drake's voice. But the Valorians understood. They had seen what the Krell did. They had lost friends and family. They knew that some evils could not be negotiated with. Zrathak made one final attempt to escape. He gathered his remaining ships and formed them into a defensive sphere. "We'll fight our way out," he told his officers. "All power to engines. We break through their lines and jump to quantum space." But the humans were already there, waiting in every direction he could run. They had studied his tactics. They had predicted his moves. They had herded him exactly where they wanted him. Captain Eric Davidson, commanding the battleship Warhammer, received the order to engage. His ship was fresh, having held back from the early fighting to save strength for this moment. "All weapons target the flagship. Time to end this." The human fleet converged on Zrathak's position like wolves closing on wounded prey. There would be no escape, no mercy, only the cold mathematics of destruction. Iris and seal the hull breaches. No one complained about their injuries. No one asked to retreat. This was what humans did. They took the hit, and they hit back harder. The battle had been going for 6 hours. The Krell were starting to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. These humans were not like the other species. They did not fight according to accepted rules. They did not value their own survival over the mission. They fought like the universe owed them nothing, because on Earth, it never had. Zrathak's fleet was down to 38 ships. He had lost 5 vessels and barely damaged the human force. His bridge was full of smoke and the smell of burned electronics. "Order a retreat," he said. "We'll regroup and come back with reinforcements." But when his ships turned to flee, they found human vessels already in position behind them. Somehow the humans had predicted the retreat and cut off the escape routes. Brandon Hayes, watching from the horizon's edge, opened a channel to all Krell vessels. "You wanted to see what humans are capable of. Now you know. This is just the beginning." Burning at maximum power. On every ship, crews prepared for battle. They checked their weapons. They reviewed their tactics. They thought about the people they were going to save. Brandon Hayes stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge as they approached the Valorian system. Through the view screen, he could see the Krell fleet in orbit around the planet. Massive ships, bristling with weapons, surrounded by smaller vessels. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," his tactical officer said quietly. Brandon smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "They don't know who they're dealing with. Open a channel to all human ships. When every captain was listening, Brandon spoke clearly. The Valorians saved us when we needed them. Now we save them. Remember your training, trust your crew, and show these predators what happens when they threaten our friends. 27 human warships accelerated toward the Krell fleet. They did not form defensive positions. They did not request negotiations. They attacked with the full fury of a species that had learned to survive on the deadliest world in the galaxy. The battle for the Valorian system had begun.